Okay, welcome everyone to our HL7 Australia AE Call work group main call. So for Thursday, 11th of June, it's only been about a week since our last one. Seems we had to make up one last Tuesday. So this has come around pretty quick. Let's start with an acknowledgement of country. HL7 Australia acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of Australia and the continuation of cultural, spiritual, and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So today we've got more AU Core R3 work to happen. So we'll do our usual business with approval of minutes, with any updates and news as well. And then into the AU Core Fire IG project, where we're going to have Heath finishing off the document reference proposal. This one's been going forever, hasn't it, Heath? It's we did a heap of information sessions and still going, but hopefully we'll knock that one off in the beginning of this meeting. Then we've got Charlotte. It's going to take us through medication dispense proposal. We've had a few information sessions on that as well, so we're ready to bring some to this meeting. And then at the end, I've just got to we've missed some obligations when we were doing diagnostic report. So we'll just have a look at adding in those missing obligations there and then talk about what's next. So we'll get straight into it. And the approval of minutes. Now, the minutes haven't actually been sent out, so we're not going to approve them today. So I'll send them out with the meeting minutes from today's meeting. So we'll end up with 3 lots that we have to approve at the next meeting. But I will note that we do now have the draft of the Encounter Record Discovery Workshop. That was that Brisbane face-to-face event. I'll find that and put it in the chat for you. So that's these here. And Shelley did an amazing job of collecting minutes for that. It was a full day, full-on event. And we've got the slides in here as well as some extremely detailed minutes. So if you weren't able to attend, or even if you did attend and you want to go back and recap, there's a lot of stuff in here with all the mentees and a heap of stuff, our panel discussions, worksheets, so this is a huge set of minutes here. I have actually read the entire thing and they are really good. So definitely have a look at that if you weren't able to attend the event. There's lots of great info in there. The other one is the minutes from last Tuesday. Given the short turnaround, they haven't been finalised and ready to be sent out, but they are in a draft format ready for review. So they're there as well from last Tuesday's meeting. So have a look at those. We'll look to approve them in the next meeting. A couple of action items. These are still some hanging on ones from the 14th of May. Don't think I've got Corey here. I didn't see him in the call. I don't know if I've got Angus either. So I don't think we've got any updates on those. There was just an action item from the last meeting last week as well, which was on me to add the AE Call work group, to add to a work group meeting agenda, revisiting the inclusion principles. Basically, there's a small update needed there where we were still referencing the technical design group. So we just need to update that to the work group. But when we find a space, it's not a priority, but when we find a space in a future meeting, we'll bring that along to just clean that up. What have we got coming up? So we've got today where we're talking about medication dispense. And really, this is the call for the last AU Core R3 changes. We've got an information session next Friday on the 19th of June on AU Core bundle. So that's when Heath's going to start talking to us about what we might want in a bundle profile for AU Core, and then looking to take that to the 25th of June meeting for decisions to do that, and sort of any other final R3 changes coming through that meeting. But we'll come back around to that at the end of the meeting where we'll talk about our lead up to ballot. Just looking at where we are at the moment. Getting into out of the work group business into the Fire IG project business, just looking at some updates. So I've got an update on the harmonisation group. So we had a harmonisation group meeting last week, and we probably haven't talked about it too much. So I thought I'd just give a quick overview of what that sparked harmonisation group is for. Basically, it's got representatives from the clinical design group as well as the work group co-chairs, and it basically provides an escalation pathway that links the clinical design group and the technical projects across clinical and technical domains. So it's a forum where we can problem solve whether standard governance has not resolved an issue, allows us to resolve scope divergence between clinical and technical projects, the escalation of high interest technical project items to CDG, where there's been no prior clinical consideration. So that's the key one we're going to talk about today. And also provides expert support for AUCDI and other related CDI publishing and feedback review. So that kind of exists. We can escalate anything from AU Core to that harmonisation group. Gives us an opportunity to sort of resolve discrepancies between clinical and technical. So it's a great resource that we've got there. Now, there was a meeting on Tuesday, 9th of June, and from AU Core, we submitted 2 papers to that harmonisation group. And so there was one on medication dispense and there was one on DiagnosticReport. So the key things, the reason we were taking these to the harmonisation group, that there's currently no AUCDI development on these profiles, on data groups for these profiles. So we're actually ahead of the clinical design group on these. So normally AUCDI would have the data groups and the elements. We'd look to map those across to FIRE and the technical project. We're actually ahead of them on this. So community interest has driven us to look to introduce these profiles into R3, but there's nothing in AUCDI on it. So as part of that, we've taken them to the harmonisation group and basically confirmed that the process of us progressing these ahead of that AUCDI development. So the understanding that we were looking for out of that was to note that CDG members are invited to participate in the AU Core workgroup decision making, and I note that we have some here today, and we generally always do, which is great. They're always welcome. The CDG members can also participate in balloting and reconciliation. So if there's issues on the way we've addressed things, they can be raised through ballot from CDG members. If we have anything where we're unsure and we think maybe we need that clinical guidance, we will take it to the CDG. So we've identified that we will do that. And also noting here that when there's models available in AUCDI, we'd look to do a reconciliation and harmonisation activity with AU Core. So we can implement these profiles now. When AUCDI looks at them, they might make some changes or introduce some things that are a bit different to what we've done. So we'll look at reviewing that and doing a reconciliation activity to bring that back. So that's what we've presented about those 2 profiles taken at the harmonisation group. That was accepted by the harmonisation group. Everyone was comfortable with that process and us progressing with these profiles. So it's good. There was some alignment there. We understand that we can continue down this path. Danielle, I don't know, did you have anything else to note on that? No.
Not really. I mean, I suppose I have a comment that I really appreciate that there's a forum that we can, in both sides, can look at how we still move together, even though whether it's AUCDI or whether it's AU Core is maybe moving a little bit of ahead of the pace to represent like the needs of each of the communities. So I think it's good, and I thought the discussion was really good. We should find a way, Michael, I think, to make the papers public. So they went to the harmonisation group, but I don't think we found a space on Confluence. So I think maybe we should take an action to like post those there so that that's available to this work group.
Yep, definitely. We'll have to find out where the outputs of the harmonisation group will end up as well. But yes,
Mhm.
definitely we should put them somewhere accessible to the work group. That's good. But it's good. It shows that we're not going rogue. We're keeping the clinical group because we want these things to be clinically led, that we'll make sure that we've gone through this process, which is working well. So great. All right, getting into our proposals. Heath's going to take us through finalising a called document reference. Heath, did you want to share your screen?
I will, but can I just ask a question
Mm.
on the last topic?
Oh,
Who are
sure.
the members of the harmonization group?
So there's a representative from, so all co-chairs. So basically all co-chairs are invited from both the clinical and technical groups are represented
So,
there.
so all HL7 working group co-chairs.
Yep. So this started as the Sparked harmonization group. There is actually a paper that we didn't discuss at the last meeting, but is to make this broader. So it would be open to all HL7 work groups because now we've had e-requesting graduate out of Sparked and go to BAU. And we do have e-requesting co-chairs there at the moment, but just sort of formalizing that sort of broader than Spark. So basically, if you're needing clinical guidance from the clinical groups, this harmonization group would exist to service that.
So is there a terms of reference or something or other around like this group?
Yeah, there is.
Mate,
Yes, yes.
maybe if that could be posted in
I'll
the chat,
post
that'd be great.
a link shortly if someone doesn't beat me to it to the page around that. And I think the terms of reference are available on the Sparked website.
You'll note that they're still probably they haven't been updated from technical design group. But that's part of the one of the proposals we didn't get to in the last meeting about broadening that scope, given that those technical design groups don't exist anymore.
Okay, I'll share my screen now.
Okay.
I can't see the chat or anything, so if anyone wants to bring something up, just let me know. Um, okay, so yes, this has been going along for a while, but we have gone through a number of iterations in obviously the information sessions, but also in working group meetings. Where we're up to is the last item. So we have previously gone through scope and the must support elements and obligations and search parameters in the last meeting. Today we're going to look at the value set bindings. So just as a quick recap, basically the scope of the document reference profile is the minimum set of expectations for indexing, storing, discovering, and accessing various formatted digital health documents for a subject to care within the Australian context.
Am I the only
Yeah.
person who can't see Heath's screen?
No, I was
It
just about
says
to say
Heath,
the same thing.
it says you've started screen sharing, but there's nothing visible.
I think I had this problem last meeting. That's weird. Let me try again.
If not, I'll share for you again. Yeah, same problem. How about I'll
Not coming
share and
through.
you just no, I'll share and then you can just
Just maybe just give me one
oh yeah.
more
Yeah.
attempt. I'll try doing the window. Is that better?
No.
Looks like I might need to reinstall. Okay, you share.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Oh, yep, you just let me know when you want me to move on.
So next, so that's what I just read out. So next and next. So these were the master support elements that we agreed on. We've got mandatory elements in there. So got subject type and content attachment that are mandatory. And as part of that, you need to provide either a data or URL to the document. We also have agreed on the reference types associated there with some of those, such as the AU core patient for subject and the author with the various AU core profiles. And we also agreed that we were just going to use the default obligations of shall populate if known and shall know error. So next, Last time we looked at search parameters. There was a couple of others proposed, but these were the final set that we agreed on, which was patient and patient plus type as shall. And we've got 3 combinations of patient plus author, patient plus type plus period, and patient plus type plus date as should search parameters as well. So that was passed last time. So today we will talk about type bindings, document type value set binding, and the base profile that we are inheriting from uses a document type value set as a preferred binding. That particular value set has 6,401 terms in it, coming from Loinc, and basically what we only use a couple of those codes at this point in time within FIRE-IGs. One of those is the patient summary code, and the second one is one that was added into the AU e-requesting document reference profile. Next. But in subsequent conversations after the last meeting, we thought that code that was added into the AUE requesting profile wasn't probably relevant to this particular set of documents, because it's very specific to e-requesting, and I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that, but basically is probably not relevant in the context of a whole clinical document. There were, I guess, parts of the associated data for the request. So they perhaps weren't a standalone document, I think is probably the rationale around those sorts of things. So Michael, I don't know if you want to comment a little bit
I
whether
think
or
that's the key point there, that it wasn't intended to be a standalone document. It was actually solving a problem where we have multiple requests and e-requesting. So and we needed a note that was shared across those multiple requests. So it was very much in the context of the diagnostic requests and just a shared note between those requests, but not a standalone document. So I think that's where we're looking at here, about having these this type binding being the types of documents that we share, and therefore probably, yeah, like you suggested, not really appropriate for this use here. Doesn't mean it won't be in the future, but I think at the moment, yeah, probably premature to add it in.
Therefore, on the next slide, we have a proposal. I have a proposal to put forward to this group, which is that we define a new value set. I'm proposing that it's called something along the lines of common document types in Australia, that it initially will include the document types that we have already articulated for the value set that we created for the composition type binding, which already includes the patient summary code, and as additional codes that are added into that composition type binding, they will automatically be included into this value set. But we can also add additional document types directly within this new common document types value set for those things that are not represented as a FIRE document. And those codes can also be from other code systems than not just from Loinc. And that might include some of the document types that have been specified for the My Health Record as an example. But in principle, this is really just setting out a placeholder for us to build on with a number of values, but the initial set of values within this new value set that will be bound to the document reference type as an additional binding will only include the patient summary code from Loinc, and that additional binding will have a purpose of candidate. So if there's any comments or questions around what the proposal is for this additional value set and binding for document type, document reference type.
Did want to just let me just put my hand up for etiquette. Do we have anyone from the agency on the line today? Maybe not in the right area. Oh, Rachel, but I don't know if Rachel is actually in that one because I mean, the My Health Record is working on, My Health Record on fire. So I'm not so sure that that third bullet point, I mean, yeah, it's My Health Record document types, but that I would see would also go in composition dot type if they're actually working on making content available in that way. So I don't think it's exclusive. I don't know if Richard or Rachel or either of you wanted to comment on that.
I'm not in a position to say anything useful here.
I guess I'm not necessarily saying they're directly added into this particular value set. They could definitely be added into the composition type value set that is bound to that one. So either way, the point being that we're not just restricted to the low-end code systems. It can include values from other code systems.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I think I misunderstood what the bullet points were saying about why this was different to the composition one, whereas I thought that the MHR document types would probably end up in the composition value type.
Yeah, so the
Value
main dot
set.
point there is that we can add additional document types as required through these two different approaches, whether it's by adding them to the composition type additional binding value set or directly into this one. Either way, but they could come from a different code system, however it's added.
And Mo's put something in the chat, and that resonates with me. Are all document types in the value set for composition type expected or always necessarily part of document reference dot type? And so, as you said, this would be a superset, and that does seem to me what you're proposing.
It is
Like for the
exactly what I'm
composition stuff.
proposing.
Yeah, cool.
Now, if we object to that, I'm more than happy to separate them out, but it does seems like a very easy way to expand this out because my vision for this is that any FHIR document could actually be referenced from a document reference resource.
Okay. Are there any other questions about this? And if not, I don't know, Heath, were you looking to make a motion? Oh, no, sorry, go ahead. Was that Richard?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about document reference. Document reference, the base resource says that this can be used to refer to things that aren't really documents, but are things that you want to point at anyway. And it has document reference type as optional, perhaps so that you can use it to refer to things that aren't really documents that you want to point at using this as a tool. Our profile, is it just for references to actual documents, and so if you want to use it as a pointer to something that's not a real document, you wouldn't use this profile? Am I understanding right here?
Sorry, Richard, I was responding to things on the in the chat. Just repeat the question.
Okay. The document reference resource, the description of it in FHIR says that you can use this to refer to documents and also to other things that you might want to refer to, like a picture or something rather like this. So it's a more general tool than a tool that just references documents. And that then could affect what sorts of values you want to put into document reference type. But I suspect that what we're thinking of with the AU core document reference type profile is that it does only refer to things that you'd call a document and that you wouldn't use it to refer to other things that are lying around that you might want to refer to. Is that right?
No, not necessarily. And we've actually been having a conversation offline this morning, kind of on this topic. So if you can just go back a slide, please, Michael.
Yeah.
Um, the rationale, I guess, from a naming perspective, is that the current binding that comes from like Firebase or Firecore
Mhm.
is called document type value set. So I'm really just leveraging that term, but you're right that the definition of document reference, it can point to things like images or scanned documents and all those sorts of things. So um,
It's not clear to me whether those non-document things would get a value in document reference type. And so I just sort of puzzling. I have no idea what's a good solution here, or I'm not even clear what the
well,
problems are.
I'll
But
give
I was thinking, have we
one of those
considered that aspect of it?
6,401 concepts. It does include image. Clinical
Okay, so
image is one of the
document,
possible
right.
document types in that base value set.
Okay, so document types includes things that are perhaps not documents.
Well,
Okay,
even more so,
I'll
they could
worry
even
about that
be
another day.
they could be sections and stuff. So like if you look at some of these bits and
Yeah,
pieces in the right-hand side here of some of the examples, some of the notes and
yeah.
stuff, those notes can actually be sections within other documents and the like. So it is, yeah, it's a little bit of a grab bag. Absolutely agree. Um,
But we're
and I
not
guess
doing
that's the
something
benefit.
novel, but we're not doing anything novel by using this in this expanded grab bag sense. Okay.
No, and by having this, I guess, more managed by Australia value set, we perhaps have a little bit more control over what are the candidate set of document types that we use here in Australia. So,
Okay.
you know,
Yep.
we are actually grabbing from this, but we're grabbing them from in where they're actually relevant in the Australian context.
Thank you.
So we can certainly have that argument when we get to it, when we start saying, oh, I want to add clinical image to this list. But I have heard from at least one vendor in Australia that would like to add images into, will use document reference for the purposes of images and currently do as part of their implementation. That was actually, I'm not sure if they're on the call. Yes, she is. I didn't want to name you. Yeah, that is a current implementation. So if again, as Daniel said in the chat, there's a bit of it. I'm happy with some editorial preferences around that, but the proposal of common document types is really just in principle. If there is a better suggestion, but I think we're just going to probably chew up more time than we have in this call if we start going down that route. And maybe we leave it for ballot if we don't like the name of the value set. So if there's no more questions, I would like to motion that this proposal on the screen as stated is accepted in principle with editorial discretion.
Okay. Thanks, Heath. So we have a motion. Would anyone be interested in seconding that motion? No takers?
Michael, this shown, I can second it.
I thank Sharon. So Sharon has seconded that motion. Do you have any other questions or comments before I launch a vote on that motion? No, all right. I'll launch an electronic vote. Okay, so you should see that vote now. If you can't do the electronic vote, you can do it in the chat, or you can also just call out your name and your vote. If you are unsure, you can abstain. Try and get as many people as possible to place a vote. Got about 75% of people voted. There's a few stragglers. Happy for you to abstain if you don't have a particular opinion. All right, we're getting up there now. I'll end that vote now in 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll. So we have 22 plus 1 in the chat, so 23 affirmative. We have 0 negative, and we have 8 plus 1 in the chat, 9 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thanks, Heath. I think that's the end of document reference finally, is it?
Finally.
For the long run. That's been good. Okay. Next we have, if I can get there, we have the AU Core medication dispense proposal, which Charlotte's taking us through. Charlotte, would you like to share your screen?
I'm happy if you keep it on the slides and I just flick through when the
Okay.
next is, Michael.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Awesome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Charlotte. I'm a pharmacist for DispenseWorks, and I've been running the information sessions for the medication dispense proposal. Next slide, please, Michael. So just to take you through the purpose of my slides, so I just want to run through quickly the scope and the purpose of what we're trying to do. I've proposed in our information sessions the must support element, or I suppose the DispenseWorks team is deemed as the minimum, what we believe may be the minimum requirements to include in AE core, and the value set findings, and then finally the search parameters. Can you go to the next slide, please? So just as an overview for the AE core medication dispense, what needs to be done. So we would like to propose or derive the AE core medication dispense profile from the AU base medication dispense profile, and go through the must support elements that are already there. We find it important being that we already have the AU core profile medication request item, and it will marry nicely with dispensing, which is quite an important part of providing medications to patients. Can I jump to the next slide, please, Michael? With the AU core medication dispense scope and purpose, when defining what we thought would be the must support element and running through what we thought were the minimum requirements for it, it was important that we defined our scope of what we deem important and why we're doing it. So the purpose of our AU core medication dispense is to define the minimum requirements for the dispensing record, indicating that a medication or product is or has been dispensed to a named person or patient. This includes the description of the medication product provided by and the instructions for administering the medication. And the medication dispense can be a result of a pharmacy system responding to a medication order. So examples of this is community pharmacy, inpatient, outpatient, hospital to ward, and then potentially community pharmacy to a hospital, community pharmacy to aged care. Next slide, please, Michael.
Charlotte, I was just wondering though whether you might want to, at this point, sort of validate that we would like an AU core medication dispense profile created based on this scope and purpose. So,
yes. May I please motion to vote? Is this something that everyone would like? Apologies, that's the first one I've run for a vote.
No, that's right. So I think we've done this before in other ones, like when Heath has brought us through new profiles, where that basically agreeing that this is something that we think belongs in AE core, something we want, and you've done a great job here of putting together the intended sort of scope and purpose of that profile. So yeah, I think you're motioning here to ask if that's what the group accepts as a scope and purpose for this profile in AE core.
So yes, is this a profile, I suppose, that we're happy to move forward with it being an AU core, so the medication dispense profile? Should we do a motion to vote there first and then vote on the scope and purpose?
I think we can do that together, probably.
Awesome.
No?
Let's do it
Oh,
together.
sorry. I see Danielle shaking her head. What was the shaking for?
Not going too quickly, I'm sorry. Richard?
Richard.
A question on scope. So if I want to record the fact that a medicine was dispensed, say a patient, no, say somebody in the community wants to record an exchange using their phone app or something or other, the fact that a medicine was dispensed to them, is that a use case that would be covered by this, or is this expected to be from clinical systems as opposed to from user systems?
Or not potential, I should say. So we did have a look at when we were reviewing the scope. The main intention is from clinical system to clinical system, and then you are able to view a dispensing record potentially by a consumer system. So there are consumer-based apps at the moment that you can view your dispensing information from. When looking at what a medication or dispensing item is, it really needs to be, it's a recording of a patient receiving either a supply from a health practitioner, whether that be medical, podiatry, whoever, to a patient. Because we also had a look at what it would be if it was, let's say, a pharmacy supplying through to Impress ward or through to a nursing home where that supply is really a purchase order. So trying to remove the purchase order aspect away from it, or removing an exchange of, I suppose, swapping items. So it's really that recording of a practitioner providing a medication to a patient. Danielle?
There's a core of the core thing we have to sit here. We're not solving workflow. And so I know we say the minimum requirements for a dispensing record. I think the published purpose would be about the exchange of medication dispense resources in fire in an Australian healthcare context. And that can serve all the things that you've got defined here, but I don't think it's limited to that. And so we just need to be really careful that we're not, and maybe that was where Heath was going, that we're not unintentionally stepping into a whole, this is how dispense works in Australia in a standards form in AU core, because it can't cover all of that. And part of like going back to the harmonization thing is saying, look, to define that and then work through that would need like the clinical design group as well. So we're doing some minimum requirements of like what is meaningful if you're just trying to share some dispense information under the expectation that this is what your system already has. So yeah, I felt like we were just slipping, scope creeping, I think, there for a bit.
Yeah, it's kind of along the lines of basically it's we're not reducing the use cases. As Daniel said, this is core, so we're not actually dictating the use cases. So Richard's use case is potentially viable, but you know, we're not saying it's not or is or whatever. So
Yeah, that was my concern, was that it looked like it was a clinical system exchange was the context that we were describing, but that the name of the resource and the positioning in core, I thought should be wider. Or this should be clear that this is about a clinical system exchange as opposed to the wider scope. And
but where do you see that? I'm not seeing anything on the words other than the example that is suggesting that it is from system to system, other than Charlotte saying system to system.
I haven't seen anything that would be a limitation. It's just seeing those words, I found myself wondering, gee, are there expectations in this profile that would make it hard to meet the community, or not so much community, but the user health information exchange, and that's likely to fall out in terms of required elements and things like that. But
Yeah.
we haven't got to that stuff yet, so I just wanting to understand the scope before going on to that further, before we went further.
Yeah. The main intention, or I suppose how I how we work through the scope was really making sure that we've not limited any use case, but we haven't moved forward into any use cases such as with purchase ordering or billing, because dispensing, especially from I suppose any clinical system, they really start to become a mesh into one when talking about workflow. So that was the pure intention of I suppose how we've done the scope in the way that it's written is that it can be, but not limited through. But it's not a purchase order from organization to organization side of things either. It's that pure supply to a person.
And I think
Or
that makes sense to me. We've covered that now, that this is what we've got here is a bit of indicative on where that's coming. We're not limited to it. So personally, I think we can probably move on from this one, as this was,
Sorry, I don't have the ability to raise hand, but I put in the post a question, the chat a question about scoping. So I wonder whether or not the scoping of this profile is about supporting dispense with a prescription or without prescription like OTC dispensers. So I just wonder whether or not the first sentences needs to have a bit of clarification.
So can I'll say we have editorial rules for what that does in AU Core, and I think this was evocative and it was a good discussion. That would turn into things, and I think we've just confirmed through the questions that it isn't limited to doing like a full dispense record, like how like ETP would view it or anything like that, right? So I think this is fine. We'll just convert that into the editorial rules, and I think the scope we're saying is anything that you would send a medication dispense resource for, and that includes the things on the page, but is not limited to the things on the page.
Including your OTC.
Sure.
Yeah. So it wouldn't exclude or discount any OTC supply or any phone approval supply where there was no authorized in prescription. But it's about just sending that record because that record is still named towards the person. Chris, just onto your point, just to run through the chat, that's okay. It would cover if you are providing antibiotic and it's being dispensed by a pharmacy in that sense of workflow. But if you're administering any medication, that would be still covered by the medication administration. So it's only where there's that authorizing prescription in that particular workflow sense. But again, try not to limit it to to particular workflow situations, if that's okay. Yes, Lisa, I 100% agree, especially in Queensland where we record OTC supplies without authorised prescription. Sorry, Brett, I know you had your hand up for a little bit.
It's all right. I think the general description is pretty good. It's just that last sentence. I'd kind of like it to have a qualifying something so people don't think it's not implementing the cases that are listed. So maybe just like examples of where this information may be produced include dispensing, right? So just some kind of qualifying words there. So, because I don't want someone to kind of read it and go, oh, this is for implementing these use cases. So, entirely. So I don't know, just some qualifying.
Can I just ask if that gets left to the editorial conversion where we like vague up AU Core?
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, yeah, that's why I'm kind of asking. It's just like I just don't want someone to read and go, "That's my use case. This is good for that."
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, that's the thing. Vague up. I like it.
I like that.
So I think similar to the way we did before. I mean, we can take the intent of this rather than verbatim for what will go in the profile, but this is the intent of the scope and purpose. So.
Yeah, I think the second paragraph is the key bit, really, isn't it? That what we're trying to agree on, as far as scope is concerned, or purpose.
All right. We did have you motion before, Charlotte. Maybe just given we've had a bit of a discussion now, we just re-motion what you were trying to say here.
I suppose, do we have an emotion or vote on the proposed? I gotta say scope, but in the relation of please we'll vague it up at the A core end, and are we happy to proceed forward with the medication dispense profile?
And can I friendly amendment that the wording is more like what do we say, in principle?
in
Like we're not going to
principle.
say we totally copy and paste this stuff. Yeah, okay, in principle. Good. Then I'm happy to second.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a friendly amendment to state that this is in principle, and a second from Danielle. Are there any other questions or comments before I launch a vote on that motion? No, I will launch poll. Okay, you should see that now. Again, you can vote in the chat for your name out if you like. We can get as many people voting as possible as well, too, please. Okay, getting up there now. So I'll end that poll in 3, 2, 1. I'll share that. So we have 23 plus 1 in the chat. So 24 affirmative. We have 0 negative, and we have 7 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thanks, Charlotte. That's his first one.
Just the first one. If everyone's happy, we'll move on to the must support elements. So I had covered the must support elements in depth in the information sessions. I do have a couple slides based off these must support elements. So if everyone's happy through line by line, and then we'll go through for a motion to vote. Everyone's in agreement after each slide, if that's okay. So starting off on the first element is being the identifier, which is the AE local dispense identifier. Deem this as a must support element inside of AE core to uniquely identify each record. That one to us was it was essentially a no-brainer from the dispensing community and the people who came through on the first iteration, or sorry, the first call. We've got the status. So again, must support understanding is that item in preparation, progress, cancelled, on hold, completed, entered in error, unfulfilled, declined, and unknown. And then we have left out at this point in time the status reason. It can be popped in with the status reason, but agreed that this must be a must support element. The medication itself. So the medication has a codable concept. So if known, then we populate either the AMT and or the PBS information. There was discussion part of our information session about being able to populate multiple AMT information and potentially looking at the manufacturer, but from a discussion in the AE core proposal, just having these as the must support elements here. Does anyone agree or disagree with anything or any comments further from these elements just to start off with?
Yes, I have a question just surrounding whether the brands and quantities come through with these. It depends on what level the AMT is pulled from. And even with the PBS, often that's only the generic that's listed. So the actual brand is often very important. So is there capacity for that and the quantity?
So if it's all right with you, Lisa, just to start off a bit of a backwards way, the quantity we'll cover just on a separate slide, if that's okay. The actual brand itself, I agree, it is quite a generic term. This will be hosted or populated via there's two bits of that information. If you're using the PBS information, we have looked at using the PBS manufacturer code as well, especially for, apologies to talk about workflow, but items such as warfarin where that brand is mandatory. and then looking at the medication type, being able to, utilize or specify which AMT you're using
Okay.
as well.
So Lisa, the
Um,
medication resources used to already do
Yeah.
that stuff. All we're actually doing in here is if you're not using the medication resource, then all you've got is a code. So if you want to record more details, then you go and use the medication resource, which we've already got a profile for on how to do that.
Thank
or
you.
and just to clarify, will things like that cover batch number? Sometimes batch number is essential. Sometimes for things such as chemotherapy, the time of manufacture is essential. They only have lives measured in hours. Are those sorts of things
So those sorts of
capturable?
things are captured through the medication resource, but won't be discussed through the medication dispense. A nice way that I'm sorry, Danielle, I'm going to use your words if that's okay. Core of core is how I've looked through the lens. So looking at, because chemotherapy was another workflow that we looked at, but taking out the workflow side of things, from the actual profile itself and seeing what's the bare minimum I need to go and display essential dispensing information at point in time. All that information is still captured through the base profiles and through like medication resource. So it'll still be able to be utilized by particular systems and particular workflows, but we've only just done, I suppose, the bare minimum that you would need for presenting this information across all systems. Or not
Okay,
limiting it, sorry, across all systems.
thank you.
That's all good. Danielle?
No, I mean, I was just going to echo what you said, that all the things that Lisa is talking about are really important for those particular use cases, and Core just abstracts it right up and goes, what's true every single time, no matter what, even if a patient is saying, this is what I got. So, yeah, I have no further comment than that.
Awesome. Liam?
Yep. I was just going to ask, so is medication reference also meant to be a must support?
Okay, that's a really
Like,
good point. It should be. We should offer both because, as we've just talked about, the additional information could be in medications. So I suspect that's what was meant, Charlotte, by medication X, is that it's like both.
Yes,
Okay. But
definitely.
yeah.
Or on a dispense item. Brett?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to jump back to the brand and AMT and all that stuff, because you can have multiple codes in that AMT codable concept, including different levels of AMT. And I'm just going to drop in the chat. There is an extension you can use to identify what's branded and generic, and stuff like that as well. So there's some tools there to kind of contain any or all of that, but I don't think there's any AU core requirement as such to have any one particular one of those, right? So, yeah, I think that's just there are tools there to handle it.
Yeah. Thank you. Lisa?
Hi, sorry, again, another probably just side case. Given the proliferation of compounded medications that don't fit under PBS or AMT, how are they going to be accounted for?
Yep,
So
we've got some guidance already in AU Core, and I think that will be defined. That's sort of been agreed by the STOMED content. And at the moment, actually, I might put a link in the chat with you about the medicinal product identification in AU Core, about the recommendations for systems on how they do that, because I agree, it's a super common use case.
And again, it's managed by the medication resource, so it's not actually the responsibility of this profile to specify that.
with the
Thanks,
medication
Lauren.
as well, you can list multiple ingredients too for those compounded items. So you can have an overarching medication resource and then provide those through it. But Danielle popped something in the chat. Sorry. It was a use case that we were having a look at when we were looking at the information sessions as well. So it was something that we wanted to make sure that we definitely covered inside the medication dispense.
All right, thank you.
So I suppose, is there, Brett, sorry. I didn't
Sorry,
see how
yeah, yeah, I just dropped in the chat. I think the medication reference is already covered by the medication X must support because it's one it can supply it, you must support. It's got to be one of those types. It's got to be coded or a medication reference.
I think if you
And
go
you
to
have
the
a must
next
support.
slide, Charlotte, you got it on the
Yeah.
top of your next slide.
Oh, nice.
There you go.
Sorry.
Oh, there.
I took my slides directly from the information session, and there just wasn't enough space on the single slide to bring everything through. Good memory.
I memorized your slides, Charlotte.
Thank you. Liam?
If you present the slide elsewhere, maybe chop just after status reason to a new page.
Yeah, and have the medication. I managed to catch myself with the when handed over and the dispense time. Medication was just so big. Thank you very much.
I was just going to say you're probably going to cover it in the next slide then, but with medication reference, I suppose we'd make sure we reference the AU core medication resource as well.
Do we just want to jump over to the next slide, Michael, and we'll just go there and just talk about that top line, and then I can jump back to the other slide and we can motion a vote for it, if that's okay.
Yep, there we are.
So with the so the medication reference was also part of the must support elements that we discussed, and it would reference the AU core. So all of my slides for any must support element, just to precursor, is I do have the base referencing in there, but where there is an AU core reference, it will be referencing the AU core over base.
I think we missed that on the top one, but yeah, it should be AE core medication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. May I please go back a slide there? So if everyone there's no final comments, are we happy to do a motion to vote for the
Sorry. Go back to the other one. And also, could you just quickly summarize? Because I know we've talked about in that AU core medication dispense column. So can I just confirm the only cardinality change is the subject element? That's the only one?
Yes.
Danielle, we're not talking about the second one yet. We're only talking about the first one. Right. We just jumped ahead because people were already talking about medication reference. I think,
but my comment also just checks that the fire cardinality column matches, I guess, what's in AU base, just to confirm we're not also voting on a cardinality change because we didn't talk about it. So I've assumed.
Not on this slide.
I'm just checking. Yeah.
So that's the only cardinality change for any recommendations, and that is to align ourselves with the US core cardinality. That was the only change.
So the star on the status reason, we just ignore that, right? That's just
Yep.
Yep.
Ignore on the status reason.
Yep.
Is everyone happy to motion a vote for the must support elements for medication dispense?
Do you want to talk about your concern about identifier, Danielle?
Well, I did specifically raise it in the chat, but I can also do it in ballot and said that I don't want to hold things up. It was interesting for me that identifier is must support here, but it wasn't for prescription, like for medication request. So that might be something we need to chat later in a reconciliation through ballot to confirm how far we're going down that thing. Identifier takes it into a bit more workflow for me, but I'm satisfied. I didn't attend the info sessions, right? So I'm satisfied that this is coming from community, and I might have a chat with Charlotte later about it. So I think we can vote. We've got more review opportunities to come back if we think that's a step too far.
I do think it is going a step too far, particularly because it's probably the local dispense identifier that you're actually suggesting is the must support more so than the generic identifier. And I don't think that's useful to anyone else other than yourself.
Yeah, the only consideration I think that came up or was thought about after the fact as well is that if you're looking at multiple dispense records for the same item, just to ensure that they were unique, it's one of the it does show it from a workflow point of view. I'm happy to look and review it again. That would be apologies to make a workflow comment. It was just more of an ease of view to the patient and to the I suppose the end, regardless of who the end user is, because if a patient has a medication request for more than one item, just to understand that they coming off two different authorising prescriptions.
So
mean,
can I propose a friendly amendment that we remove must support from identify? Would you accept that as part of your motion?
I'm happy to accept it as part of my motion, yeah.
Danielle, you accept that friendly amendment for your
I do
seconder?
accept the friendly amendment. Yep, I do accept it.
Randy, have you got a question or a comment? I think you're on mute.
Are you allowing me to speak? Sorry. Hi. Hi, everyone. I wanted to just support Daniela's point and kind of raise that I was a bit concerned if a resident or a client it has got multiple prescriptions and changes location, how this would reflect that. And maybe I'm also jumping ahead, but I just wanted to support Danielle because I think she has a very clear point. That's all.
So just to be clear, we have a motion. We had a friendly amendment to remove, so to accept these must supports. We had a friendly amendment to remove the must support on identifier. Was there a second? Had you seconded, Danielle, or we didn't have a second yet, did we?
I don't know. I motioned and maybe I just assumed Charlotte did.
I'm not sure. I didn't hear a second. I think Heath threw you under the bus.
No. I heard Danielle second.
Okay.
I second too.
All right. So just to be clear, who was the second? Who was in Daniel? Were you in first? Was it the second? And you're happy to support
I beat the crowd to second with and I've agreed to the friendly amendment. Yes.
Agreed to the friendly amendment. Okay. So we have a motion, we have a second, we had a friendly amendment to remove must support on identify. Are there any other questions or comments before I launch a vote? Oh, where you launched the poll. You should say that. Okay, we got numbers up. I know we're still working. We get a few more voting if possible, please. Okay, got enough up now, so I'll end that in 3, 2, 1. And we have 22 plus 1 in the chat, so that's 23 affirmative. We have 0 negative, and we have 6 abstain. So that motion has passed. And we'll jump to part 2 of that.
So on the second page of our must support elements, so just touching on it again, the medication reference we've deemed as must support, and we'll follow the AE core medication reference. The only change of cardinality that we've got is for subject, so a one-to-one, so it should be must support for a patient or for a group, but I suppose veering more towards patient. They should always have a patient. It shouldn't just be going out to anyone else. Otherwise, that would be deemed as if it's going out to an organisation, it would be a purchase order. So just so everyone knows where our thoughts are with that one. We've got the action of performer, so we need to know who's been performing the action, and the actor being a must support as well. So understanding again the performer. The authorizing prescription we do have as a must support, but we have made comment that it won't always be there, but that will be covered in the must support obligations of AU Core. And then as well, the quantity. So you must always have a quantity on the dispense. How many did you provide out during the dispensing record? Does anyone have any comments on the second round of must supports? There's only 3, I promise. Heath?
I think we have an AU core related person as well. So that's just another minor.
Which one? The performer?
For the actor, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, a UCOR related person instead of the base fire resource. Yeah.
Yeah, only device would be base.
Yeah. Well, the underlying fire standard, I guess, and not AU base.
Core, fire core. Yeah, whatever you want to call it.
Thank you. Lisa?
Hi, thanks. I'd just like to point out something that may not be unique to this particular work group, but I'm noticing a constant creeping of American spelling as opposed to Australian spelling, and whether this is a direction that we're choosing more generally or even aware of more generally. I certainly don't want that to hold this up or have that
No,
as a critique of this particular piece of work, but it's what I'm just noticing in this small snapshots that I get to see.
Yeah, so I'll comment on that as like the primary IG editor for this stuff. And yeah, so we're stuck with it. Like literally you have to put a Z in the Y format or it will fail. So the Z, so everywhere we have organization with a Z, we mean the technical fire artifact. When we're just talking about like organizations and they have identifiers, we absolutely do use like the Australian spelling for that. But yeah, for all these ones, because they're referencing the specific fire artifact, we're stuck with the Z.
Same for
Okay.
authorizing prescription as well. That's
Yeah.
fire-defined element name. We can't change it.
All right, thank you. As long as it's noted that that's the reason for that, and where possible, we do stick to our Australian identities. Thanks, Danielle.
There are spots where we could put the S. So, for instance, AU core organisation, we could decide to call that with an S, but then that would add to more confusion than doing what we've done. So what we've done is we've said it's organisation with a Z, and it's the AU core version of it. So what we could technically call that string, have any string for that, if we didn't put a Z in there, it would just make life more difficult. And so
Yeah,
while we actually have the power to put an S there, it's a bad idea, and we
Yeah,
thought about it and moved back from it.
we're referring to the resource type by its name instead of, which is not arguable. Yeah, so whilst we could put anything in there, we are actually referring to the resource type, which has a Z in it.
It's a tricky balance.
So are we happy to motion a vote on the must support elements that are presented on this slide?
Was that a motion?
Yeah, was that a
Charlotte?
motion? I think that was this.
I'm so sorry. I have a motion to vote on the must support elements for this slide.
And
Including
the
the
noted
cardinality.
amendment, yeah.
Sorry, what
Including
was
the
that, Brett?
cardinality change for subject.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's fine.
I think
Yep,
we had discussed that, and that the references are AE core references as well, where they're available.
Right,
So
perfect.
Yes.
I don't think that's not an amendment. I'm chair, I can't, but just noting that that's what was discussed leading up to that. So
Again, I'm happy to second.
okay. So we have a motion and a second for these must support elements, the cardinality and the references, AE core references. A motion and a second. Any other comments, questions before I launch a vote?
I have a question about performer.
Mhm.
Now, we don't have a must support on the function. So that means that it's a useful thing to send performer with an actor without hang on. It's quite plausible to send performer with a function and an actor, and for a receiver to say, oh, it's got a function in it. I don't know what to do. I'm going to reject it. And that's what we're allowing by this particular combination of must supports.
I don't know what that means, Richard. What?
Well, what must support is must support on function would say no error. For a receiver of a medication dispense for a receiver of one of these, okay, if we've got must support on performer, then I don't error when I get a performer, and I've got a must support on an actor, so I don't error when I get an actor. But if somebody sent me a value for function, I could error on that because I haven't got a no error on it. Is that right?
Yep.
You couldn't
Okay.
fall
We
over.
have
You
an
couldn't. It's
in-principle
covered there.
rule that everywhere we have a child element of a backbone element, we
Yeah.
put must report on the backbone element. We've got that described in the must support section. That's just what
Okay.
we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
In which
And
case,
so
why do we
anything in the
need must?
background.
Why do we need
Yeah.
must support on actor?
Because
we want it.
yeah, it's must support. So if performer is provided, then you must support
Yeah.
actor.
But you don't have to support function.
No.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can ignore it, but yeah, but I think because it's must support's defined on the backbone, that implies that you would anything within that backbone definition should be acceptable under the same rules.
It's not what we've said.
No,
It's not
not
must
what we've
support.
said.
So
Is that because
function is not must support. As long as you're within the context of fire, but in principle, you don't have to support it.
Yeah, I
Right.
might think about that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, don't have to support it. That's nice for the person populating it. The person populating it doesn't have to punch it. Sorry. The must support means when I'm creating one of these, if I know the performer, I have to populate it if it's relevant in case and all the rest of it. And likewise for actor, I have to populate it. And for function, I don't have to tell you what the function is, even if I know. And that's what we've got here for the person creating the record. Fine, I'm cool with that. The person receiving the record, what we're saying is that because the must support we're doing is no error, which is a really weak one, we're saying, well, if you populate function, we're not even obliging you to no error when I populate function.
There's no obligation on them,
No,
no
there are
expectation.
more elements.
Can I
Like
potentially
what you're
we're
trying to
gonna
go, Richard, is say somehow we have to put must support no error on every single element of a fire resource. We don't do that. This
I
is
don't
just
want to
one
do
more
that.
thing that we don't put must support on.
Okay, fine, good. I don't want to go down that path. I just was hoping that that's a path that is avoided, and if it is, good.
I think this is a slippery slope. So we do have guidance on must support in AE core. If it's not sufficiently covered for this scenario, I suggest, Richard, that you raise a JIRA for it to say that our must support guidance doesn't sufficiently cover it. But I don't think it's relevant right here for this motion.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other comments before I launch the vote?
I just made some changes to the slides so that it reflects what I think was just voted on. So
I haven't
it's
voted
now
yet, but
what we're about to vote on then. So AU core related person, I've added the AU core medication, even though there's no space there. So I think that was the main changes that we agreed on.
Charlotte, Danielle, are you happy that this now reflects what was meant by the motion?
I'm happy.
Yes.
Danielle? Okay. Our motion has confirmed that. So this is what we're voting on the slide. And I will launch the vote. And if you voted, yep, we're up there. So I'll end the poll in 3, 2, 1. We have 20 plus 1 in the chat, 21 affirmative, 0 negative, and 6 abstain. So that motion has passed.
This is fabulous. Thank you. So this is the final round of must support elements. I've only got 3 on this slide here, but I just thought I would go through all elements that were discussed in the information session. So we've got a must support element on the when prepared opposed to on the when handed over. inside of the core medication dispense profile. The reason being is that systems record the when prepared opposed to the when handed over, so it provides more value at this point in time. And we've also got a must support on any annotations on the prescriptions and on the dosage instruction. We only have a must support on the dosage instruction itself, not on any other references. Sorry, I did put it under the AU base reference, but the text, timing, route, dose, and rate, and dose X, they're actually US core references. I just wanted to show the difference in them as well. But just to put it simply so that systems do populate it, is that we've just got it on the dosage instruction itself, not on any other field, as they're not in base. Any questions on this slide here?
Yeah, hang on, let me put my hand up.
Danielle?
Good, I'm first, yes. We can't do that on a backbone element. Backbone is nothing. So backbone only gets must support marked when there's something we actually want out of it.
They're not in base.
They are in, well, like nothing is must support in base ever. Like we say that about all the other elements. Like nothing is must support in base. So what we're clarifying for implementers is what are the minimum requirements when you're exchanging dosage information. We've done that in medication statement, medication request. We can't just backbone. We can't just backbone must support.
No, hang on. It's no, that I got it blended. I'm just going to add you a message into the in the base medication dispense, there is no text, timing, route, dose rate, and dose. It's just dosage instruction.
Yes, and so AU base would not have done that because that's not how AU base works. So it's up to us in core to provide what are the minimum requirements of when we're exchanging dosage instructions, and putting must support at the backbone element of dosage instruction is incomplete. We can't AFMM1 this profile if we leave it there.
Okay.
So we need to be a bit clearer on, is that text? Which is what we've done, I guess, for medication request and medication statement. I think we've said like text is must support. If you've got it, exchange it. But we've got to pick a child element of that data type in order to, I think that's what we should do. And maybe we leave that to a next step, but I think it's really quite dangerous to just leave it at dosage instruction. And like, thank you for clarifying and showing that it isn't a backbone element, but it's like we've got these other resources we're putting into core. So maybe we don't have to solve it today, but I think we'll need to solve it by the time we publish the next release of AU core to say, what does it mean to exchange that in a minimum way? I don't know if that's what you were going to comment on, Heath.
I would like to propose we add text as must support, because that's consistent with what we've done with medication request in AU core.
And statement. It's both consistent.
Would you be acceptable on that, Charlotte, too?
I would be very much accepting of just doing the must support on text.
Does that mean we're profiling dosage now in
No,
AU core as well?
no, it's in line. You do it in line. We've done it in the other
Okay.
resources.
So we haven't done it in the AU base. Well, we haven't profiled AU base dosage. We've
Yes.
profiled it within the individual resources themselves.
Yeah, so if you looked at AU core medication statement and so forth, you would just see it in AU core medication statement instead of having this like separate AU core dosage profile. It's just, you can just see it in the parent resource type, if you will.
Put the link, Michael, in the chat if you want to just click on that.
Okay. Let me get What are we looking at?
Right down the bottom.
Right down the bottom. Okay, here we go. All right. Oh,
Yeah,
so that
like
references base dosage and does that. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm proposing we do that, and sounds like it's not just request. It's also statement. So I think from a consistency perspective, I also think from an implementation perspective that we need at least a definitive place to go and look at what are the instructions that were related to the dispense, which may be different to what was put on the request.
Okay.
Only sometimes it's different.
Well, it might be in capital letters.
A few more letters put at the end. I'm happy to. That would be a really good request, Heath. I'm all for that as well.
Sharon, I do have a question.
Yes, sorry, Stephen.
Sharon, I do have a question on when handed over. I know that we had discussed this during the information session, and the consensus was that a system out there do not necessarily populate it, so therefore it is not practical to put a much support on it.
Yeah.
Do have a follow-up workflow questions. Would a medication dispense record be ever be sent out when the medication is not handed over to the patient?
No. So if a medication is being dispensed, the when handed over would be when it's being sent out to the patient, or when the patient picks it up from a pharmacy, or it's provided to the patient in one mean or another. With the when handed over side of, I suppose, when that data collection does happen in a workflow context, it's based off the billing side of things. 9 times out of 10 in community pharmacy. So from a when handed over point of view, it's not a relevant field that is captured a lot of the time. I
know that, but I also know that from the workflow perspectives, there is a concept called reverse dispense. That means that a drug has been dispensed if the patient hasn't picked it up or hasn't been handed over to the patient, then the process of reverse dispense happen. My question is that in any cases of medication dispense, would a dispense record ever be transmitted or exchanged without the patient picking up the medication? That's the question.
I think we're getting into implementation details. And
no, I'm not. We are not talking about implementation
I
details.
think we are.
We're talking about workflow, and therefore the impact on about this when handover.
I think this is around what is the status in that context more so than anything. So that's why I'm saying I think we're getting into workflow like you declared, and it's definitely up to the implementation around this on whether they do or not expose this or exchange this. So something is queryable, it's queryable, and it's but it's the status associated with that dispense at the time of querying it. So again, that's why I'm saying it's implementation. So I think we have to just go silent on this because it is core of the core, and we can certainly get further guidance wherever we end up putting that, like whether it's in the fire AG or something or other in the content, whether it's around what is the status of something and when it hasn't been handed over yet. Is it in progress? All those sorts of things. So, but it's not our responsibility here in core to define that.
I would disagree.
Can I just go timing, guys? We're running out of time.
I know, but I just want to say one more thing before I rest the case. If we are talking about closing the loop of sort of like making the information meaningful to ensure that a prescription can close the loop with the dispense, then that piece of information is important. So I would just say this much, and then I will stop. And I disagree that it is an implementation issue. It is a information management issue.
So I think the debate is when prepared or when handed over should be must support. Could we just make a friendly amendment because no one seems to disagree on the other parts? Let's agree on those, and then we can bring some of this back to like the next week. We are running out of time.
Yeah, sorry. Can I just clarify? Steve, are you asking for a change to when prepared? Were you asking for that not to be must support?
Well, I'm not asking for anything. I just want to make it clear that there is a value for having information about handover.
Yes. So I think I understand that. So I think what we're saying is we're not saying you can't use it, right? So all we're saying is the minimum, the core of the core minimum is when prepared. We're not saying you can't use handed over. We're not
No,
saying
no,
that
no.
isn't.
Yeah, I'm not saying that this means that you can't use it. I'm saying that why not have my support, all right?
Okay.
And that's the
So
question. Yeah.
okay. So just on that then, I think we can motion potentially to accept what this is on. We can have a second motion later, which we're not going to have time for this meeting. We'll come back to it next meeting about additional must supports. So
Okay.
if you're not suggesting that the minimum we're suggesting here, you're not asking changes those, you're asking for additional, we can do a separate vote on that in the next meeting if you would like.
Sure.
Richard?
I was going to say that while the workflow may be that you only exchange these after they're handed over, you may not always have that information in a way that you can exchange it. So Stephen's thing about the use case, you only send these when you've handed it over might be true without it being true that you've always got the value to put in the field.
Yeah. And as well, I suppose coming up, there are situations where the item is dispensed but never handed over, i.e. the deferred situation that came up through the information session, but it was agreed upon in the information session that because of it was a workflow side of things, that we were to discuss it potentially in base opposed to core.
I would prefer if we could remove the must support on when prepared and then discuss like the when prepared, when handed over in like the next call and just go
I think
we must support in.
we're out of time anyway. So
Okay, so we're going to do the whole thing
we'll
next.
we'll have to carry it over now. So I think we have reached time.
Do you want to zoom to my schedule then?
Oh, too far. Oh
You've
man,
come back
got
to me.
all the way.
What has happened?
Yeah, don't read the lights again.
Because we've got a schedule where we
There we go.
are, okay, here's where we are. So we got 2 more calls, and that's it. 2 more calls to completely do any possible change we want in for ballot, and that also includes on agreeing on AFM1, which we must do, or any of these profiles or like old content cannot go into ballot. So uh part of that is going to be this call for like last changes. Um, it doesn't mean that you can't raise things in ballot, but we have a very, very like vanishing window here to put in any of the changes for the next release. Seems like we're close to dispense, but I don't think we talked about search parameters. So to
Yeah.
complete
So
it, we'll have
we'll
to
have
do
to
that.
carry the rest of our medication dispense over. So we've got to finish must support and search parameters and some obligations on that. Heath has an information session next Friday on bundle. That would also go into that meeting on the 25th as well.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think we're going to make bundle. Like in terms of actually getting ready for ballot, going through AFMM1, talking about
Well,
search parameters, we've got 2 meetings. That's it. That's what's left. Unless we get an out of session meeting where we like have another one in between like the 25th of June and the 9th of July. That's our other option.
well, we have the information session on bundle on next Friday. As part of that, we can discuss the approach for it and the need for it, and determine that, noting our time constraints to get to ballot.
Because can I just confirm we still need some diagnostic report confirmation before we can agree on AFMM1? Is that like search parameters? Like
Obligations,
what
just default obligations. That's all. That's the only thing missing off diagnostic report.
Okay, sure. Good. That should be quick. Okay. And then we're going to be publishing on the 29th of July the snapshot. I mean, there's a Spark testing event and we're going to be testing out as much as possible. So any changes that we actually want to test, and bring the Spark testing event, we need to put into the next meeting so that the IG editors have enough time to like put that into the IG and release a snapshot so we can load it and test it out. And then it'll be like final changes. And then this will be the administrative run through so that can go through the approval process to be balloted. And the ballot period starts at the beginning of August, basically. So that's the 5th of August. And then there'll be a connectathon towards the end of that ballot period that we can be testing out, I think, probably anything else we've like come up with in that very final meeting.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Good meeting. We'll continue in the next one on medication dispense, Charlotte. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Well done, Michael.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Charlotte,
Thanks,
thank you,
Michael.
Charlotte. Bye.
Good, Charlotte.
Thanks. Bye.